What's going on, y'all? The Brandon Brownson here with another episode of Theory Addict. So, before we go into this episode of Theory Addict, I have a couple of things I want to say. On September 13th, 2011, I released the very first episode of Theory Addict, which, as I'm sure most of you would know, is the Ed, Edd and Eddy Purgatory Theory. After that, I've gotten somewhere around 1,500,000 combined views between all of my Theory Addicts. That absolutely means the world to me, and I want to thank each and every single one of you who have watched Theory Addict. Whether you liked it, whether you didn't, it doesn't matter. You guys and your support have helped me reach a level of success I never thought was possible, and I owe you guys the world, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. With that said though, we have a theory we need to read. And I figured to celebrate 2 years doing Theory Addict, I would do one that I get requested all the time. After doing 4 episodes of Theory Addict on Pokemon, I think it's about time we cover the big one. That's right, today we're going to be reading the Ash is in a Coma theory. Now, as always, before we start, I just want to remind you guys of a few things. First of all, I did not come up with this theory. I'm not sure who the theory creator is, as I found this in a million different sources, but I found this particular copy of the theory on the Creepypasta Wikia page. Second of all, I want to clarify that I do not believe this theory, and neither should you. I'm reading this theory for entertainment purposes, not informative purposes. Last of all, I just want to remind you guys to keep the comments section civil. Basically, just don't be a dick and we'll be fine. With all of that said, you guys have waited a really long time for me to do this particular theory, so let's jump right into it. Have you ever noticed that the pacing, tone, and story development of Pokemon changes after Ash is hit by lightning early on? How Ash and his world are relatively normal up until after that incident? Well, there's a theory floating around the old interwebs that might explain that a little bit more. The accident with the bike put Ash into a coma. Days later, he was found and hurried to the hospital and treated with heavy medication. This is why, after the first couple of episodes, the Pokemon world becomes less menacing. The medication took effect and stabilized his coma dreams so that, instead of being terrifying, they become idyllic. They allow him to live out his Pokemon Master fantasies. After the beginning episodes, the series is a result of Ash's subconscious mind fulfilling his desires as well as attempting to escape reality. Should Ash realize that he's in a coma, he would wake up and suffer brain damage, so he must take down all of his mental barriers one by one. If he can do that, he can come to grips with who he is and escape his coma. Further evidence comes from the realization that even though his journeys take him vast distances, he never usually travels by bike, due to him developing a phobia of them. The coma in fantasy explains why he never changes much physically. It explains the worldwide socialism, as he's thought up a safe system of government that would run smoothly and keep the world going, allowing his adventures to work like they do. It also explains how a child can go off on his own into a world of dangerous and untamed animals. In addition, it explains why every town has the same police officer and every Pokemon Center has the same nurse. Joy and Jenny he knew from his hometown, and they act as a safety net or anchor, allowing him to feel safe no matter where he goes. They represent stability. The professor represents Ash's ideals, which is why Gary became a professor. The fantasy also explains why every time he enters a new region that virtually nobody has heard of him despite his conquests. How else could Paul, the rival of the Sinnoh area, not know of someone who placed in at least the top 16 of all 3 leagues and destroyed the Orange League in the Battle Frontier? Moving on to the characters closer to him, Ash's traveling partners are aspects of himself he can enjoy but cannot associate with himself. Brock is Ash's repressed sexuality. Ash fell into the coma, a virgin, and as such needed an outlet for his growing sexual frustrations. However, since he can never experience sex, Brock must never succeed. Brock's stay with Professor Ivy was an attempt by Ash's mind to suppress his sexuality. Of course, Brock isn't just a projection of Ash's sexuality, but also a projection of Ash's fatherly instincts. He leaves his siblings to journey with Ash because he can't cope with having that much responsibility. You may notice that James got much more dialogue in this part of the series, as well as getting more touchy-feely with his Pokemon, and exposing much of his backstory. Ash didn't enjoy this much, which is why Brock returns, horrified, and refuses to speak about it. Ash's subconscious was repressing him at the time, so other than a general feeling of dread, he has no idea what happened. Further evidence of Brock being Ash's sexuality is that he keeps returning to the series after Ash meets a new female aspect of himself. Misty is the first such aspect we encounter. Because she is the first and is merely an aspect of Ash are explanations as to why Misty plays such a prominent role in the show, but is ultimately unattainable, since he never really knew her before the coma. Since Misty is his initial love interest, if only subconsciously, he needed her to reach a certain level of womanhood. He felt that people could only have relationships after they've matured. In practice, however, he finds he can't cope with it as he lacks real-world experience. He wants the normal, pushy, arrogant Misty he knew, thus not letting her keep Togepi. We can see this arc in the constant berating of his sexuality, but her eventual mellowing until she had just faded off into the background. Since Ash was quite attached to her, this was traumatizing. After this experience, anyone around him threatening to mature quickly ends up leaving only for another, more naive villain to enter his life. Gary Oak is what Ash wants to be. He is wish fulfillment. He succeeded and then settled down to a normal life. Ash needs someone to succeed in his world or he won't be able to validate it and will start questioning why he is where he is. It's a subconscious trap to keep him from becoming too aware of his situation. His mind must have figured out that awareness of the coma would snap him out of it, so it took something the boy already loved and built a way out for him with it. However, Ash is too complacent to make a final stand and fight his way out of it and cannot escape. This is why he keeps encountering legendary Pokemon. They're his mind's way of showing him he can do great things if he tries. It's a way to encourage him to push forward. Team Rocket are the qualities of himself that Ash deems too negative, but is coming to terms with. Jessie and James want to appease Giovanni, Ash's father figure. To achieve this, Jessie will trick the submissive James into doing her bidding. Meowth essentially wants to appease him because he remembers the good times with Giovanni. This places Meowth in a category known as Ash's corrupted innocence. This is apparent because Meowth is able to speak. In fact, the whole reason Meowth can speak is so Ash can eventually accept the aspects of Team Rocket as a part of himself. Ash had issues with his father, so he put him atop the evil corporation and demonized him. In the real world, there might actually be a Team Rocket, but it's doubtful that Ash's father is the leader. Ash likely feels the split between his parents was partially his fault, but he also heavily blames his father. The split caused his mother to move out of the city down to Pallet Town, and is one reason why Ash initially embarks on his journey, to escape the turmoil at home. The whole organization, including Butch and Cassidy, is symbolic of his inability to escape his father's machinations. James is implied homosexuality, which does not necessarily make Ash homosexual and gullible, while Jessie is vanity and manipulation. Since Meowth has potential for rehabilitation and doesn't want to be evil, this once again fits with the conflicting personalities and demonized self theory. Team Rocket cross-dresses because Ash is exploring his gender, which is a different facet than what Brock represents. And this was a method that allowed his gay/vain side to experiment freely. When it is found that it wasn't something he was interested in, his free side stopped playing with it. Max came with May. He played the ego and she played the ID with great aspiration in that session. They worked for a little while, but with Ash being a teenager, his sexuality had come back into play. He kept reinventing himself and eventually wrote new aspects, but his mind slowly brought the old ones back as a crutch to make the transition easier. Dawn is Ash giving himself a chance to love. Since he'd already established Misty as someone he's not likely going to go anywhere with, he created a new super female. One that was more like him and less violent. You may note that while May and Misty had no tolerance for Brock's behavior, Dawn seemed to try and shrug it off. Tracy, the breeder, was a possible future for Ash that he discarded. The future was one that he sent off to work with the professor, Ash's ultimate ideal of a father figure, when Tracy disrupted the dynamic Ash had with his other possibilities. With Ash's mind fighting the coma and Ash viewing this person as a companion, Tracy was quickly replaced with a more threatening rival. Pikachu represents Ash's humanity. This explains the episodes where they get separated and Ash desperately wanting to find him, even to the point of working with Team Rocket, which of course are aspects of himself he would never normally associate with, but for some reason cannot. Team Rocket wants to steal Pikachu and hand him over to Giovanni. Jesse and James will always oppose Ash because he is terrified of the thought of his humanity lying in the hands of his father. However, this is the same reason he will work with those aspects of himself in order to save his humanity. Ash couldn't evolve Pikachu because that would mean challenging his concept of who he was, which was something he wasn't comfortable with while still working through his original issues. The narrator is Ash's higher mind, recapping and explaining the progress he's made and the tribulations he will face, allowing insight into how to best awaken him. Team Rocket's methods gradually become more and more ludicrous because Ash is only a child dreaming these things up. This is why Team Rocket's disguises are always believed. He knows it's them, at least at a subconscious level, but he chooses to ignore it so he can better himself. In a sense, the Ash who wants to escape is sabotaging the Ash who wants to stay lost in his mind so that there can be more conflict and hopefully an eventual escape. The escape is a consequence of coming to terms with who he is. As mentioned previously, Team Rocket are a method for Ash to deal with grounds he's uncomfortable with, tackling on his own. You may recall that in the early days of the show, there were animals, or at least references to animals. For example, the fish in the aquarium of the Cerulean City Gym, or that the Pokedex lists Pikachu as rat-like. These animals don't matter to Ash's psyche, so they don't come into play much. If Ash loved puppies, for example, everything would be about different breeds of dogs and the dogfighting circuit, but as the series goes on, you see fewer realistic animals and more Pokemon. This can be a sign of Ash's mind deteriorating. As he's in the coma, he's losing concepts of some animals and machinery and replacing them with Pokemon. It can explain things like electric Pokemon working as power generators. These are signs that his memory of the old world is slipping more and more as time goes by. The Pokemon realm will be idealized continuously the longer he has no stimulus from the real world. Ash may or may not be mentally deteriorating, but he is becoming more accustomed to his fake world's rules. The wild Pokemon are his rationalizations of the functioning of his created fantasy. It's the "a wizard did it" syndrome. If he doesn't know how it works, his mind says Pokemon. The Pokemon in Ash's team, however, serve the purpose of displaying his issues and aspects of himself. For example, Charmander represents his sex drive, which isn't necessarily his sexuality like Brock is. At first, it's a cute, easy thing to control, but eventually it becomes a raging inferno of disobedience, since Ash has no real understanding of his sexuality, thus has no way to vent or keep it in check. Bulbasaur was his unwillingness to change, reflected in when it declines to evolve and almost decides to stay behind until he battled it. Squirtle was his willingness to follow the lead of others, as evidenced by the gang it ran with. Even though he ran the gang, they were viewed as one group, and Ash's subconscious gave him the strongest one. Butterfree was his crushing loneliness, which he dealt with when he released it to join a flock. His bird types are his recklessness, always willing to sacrifice something at a moment's notice for him to win. When Ash is training Pokemon, it's an attempt to push his own problems away on someone else. However, he realizes this and usually trades back very quickly. Not only are Ash's Pokemon a manifestation of different parts of himself, the Pokemon of other trainers are as well. Koffing and Ekans were symbolic of Team Rocket's willingness to change, hence their evolutions. Once his mind was able to overcome that roadblock and allow them to change once, it gave him the chance to truly change. An interesting note is that Pupitar is a rationalization, a Pokemon the rival caught before they met. Even Ash would become suspicious if everyone he met had no carryover Pokemon from previous places he had been to. Other trainers are more direct forms of his issues, ones he must either come to terms with or outright suppress. Gym leaders are more primary aspects of his personality, with each Pokemon being stronger than the last to display a level of skill he can only be capable of if he gave in to it. In effect, he is doing battle with a part of him that he would rather not have in control. Originally, Ash had the battles, which evolved into team battles and contests. The explanation for this is that his issues became more and more complicated, and the means of dealing with them needed to become more complex. The fact that he uses issues he's already dominated to win is a sign he's growing stronger. Ash releases his Pokemon because his mind is forcing him to let go of them. The second he raises an overpowered team, a tournament comes up, and after fighting his way through it, he has to go to a new land for new challenges. However, with an overpowered team, there wouldn't be any changes or any way to motivate him further. The Ash that wants to stay in a coma and keep journeying hands his solved issues over to Professor Oak so he can continue and overcome the unresolved ones. This is essentially his mind forcing him to deal with his problems. Ash's rivals and the Elite Four are ultimately the strongest part of this cycle. Having Pokemon that are essentially godlike, they represent both what can be attained and what is unattainable. Ash's rivals are all possible futures he has envisioned for himself. Note that they are all older than him. This originated with Gary Oak, someone Ash knew from real life and built up into sort of a god within his mind. However, Gary progressed and changed to suit Ash's vision of himself and his ultimate desire, eventually settling down into a professor role after beating the Elite Four. With Gary Oak in retirement, his mind needed a new rival for him, thus the births of Richie, the good aspects of the rivalry, and Paul. Paul is his mind's last-ditch effort to snap him out of it, to force Ash to eventually come to terms that this perfect world is not the best option or path to waking up. Paul is Ash's shadow, one that wants to push on even harder and harder. He is the part of Ash that will stop at nothing to escape the coma world. Mewtwo is a new form of treatment, done with electrical impulses and a machine to know Ash out of it, taking down every last one of his mental guards, the original Pokemon in the movie. In Ash's mind, Mewtwo and his clones were, in the real world, the treatment for the mental safeguards that were protecting Ash and keeping him comatose, the Pokemon of his world. The clones were counters to the issues Ash had thought solved, and each appeared to Ash as the exact copy of his defense. The clones didn't play by the rules of Ash's world. They didn't use any special attacks or moves, they just beat down their counterpart through brute strength. The treatment was working. However, there were side effects. The electric jolts were beginning to affect Ash's nervous system. If the treatment continued, he would be paralyzed. His mind manifested this in the dream world by petrifying him, were it not for the end of the treatment by Ash's mother, who knew her son wouldn't want to live in a world that he couldn't explore. Ash would have remained a stone forever. After this, Ash needed to recover from the damage caused by the electric therapy. In order to reduce the danger Ash's consciousness felt from it, his subconscious began downplaying the effects in this world, which is why Pikachu's electric attacks, once noted for their strength against Team Rocket, no longer had any effect on Ash other than comic relief. As we can see, Ash may well have been trapped in this world forever. However, like every dream, like everything, there is a beginning and an end. What would happen if Ash never recovered? In a hospital room, we see Delia, obviously distraught. She's talking to a doctor with a grim look on his face. The man is saying that their insurance is up and the boy has had no change in brain activity in years. The shock of taking him off life support has a very small chance of awakening him. She tearfully agrees. Back in Ash's world, he has finally defeated the Elite Four, and one by one the people around him disappear. Eventually, everything is black. Pikachu comes dashing toward him, glowing brighter and brighter in the darkness. Eventually, he reaches Ash and the two embrace one last time. In the hospital room, his life signs fading, Ash mutters his final words. "I want to be the very best." He will die never having known his dream except as naught but a dream. When he came back to reality, he knew it all for the lie it was, knew it was his imagination. Knowing that all his efforts, ambitions, and friends were nothing, he will let go. As he utters his final words, he barely opens his eyes and sees the silhouette of his mother, her face hidden by her hands wiping away the tears. They make eye contact, and one final realization fills him before he loses all of his strength. He sees that his mother was holding out hope that he'd recover all that time. He sees her and finds that her hope had been broken as she'd come to the realization that she'd outlived her only child. He dies knowing that he is loved, but that it means that the one person closest and most real to him is utterly crushed. Of course, there are other possibilities. The fountain of time flows in mysterious ways. One could not go back against the currents, such as Gatsby. However, one could never see what is waiting for him downstream. Ash finally defeats Lance, only to be confronted not by Gary Oak, but a mute mirror image of himself. The voice of his narrator speaks to him, telling him that he can finally escape the prison of his own mind. One by one, his friends appear and melt away into more copies of himself, cheering him on. After a long, tough battle against himself with the assistance of all of his Pokemon he had ever befriended, he jolts awake. In his hospital room, he sees his parents asleep. He he finds himself unable to speak. Ash pushes forward towards his recovery. He goes through physical therapy, training harder and harder with rehabilitative Pokemon, until he can walk on his own again. This time, an older and wiser Ash sets out on a journey. Just like the last time, he's late getting to Professor Oak's laboratory. When there's only one Pokemon left, he suddenly recalls all of his memories of his life and realizes his friends are gone forever. As he sets out with his new companion, he finds the world is darker than he imagined, more real. Pokemon and people die. He too had aged. He vows to become the Pokemon Master he dreamed he was. He vows to himself. He vows to them. I will be the very best. Well folks, just like that, another episode of Theory Addict has come and gone. Now before I go, I want to remind you of a few things, and I'd also like to plug a couple of things. First of all, I want to remind you that this theory is not my own, and I don't believe it, neither should you. Also, I'd like to remind you, don't be a dick in the comment section. I don't like having to be an asshole back, so let's just try and keep it civil. Also, I'd like to go ahead and plug my latest channel, as well as the Chameleon Couch Productions Facebook group. The Chameleon Couch channel is a channel that me and my good friend Austin, aka Evolving Sideways on YouTube, had started about a month ago. You might recognize Austin as the guest reader in the Harry Potter edition of Theory Addict. Anyways, every 2 weeks we draw a topic from a hat, a random topic that was given to us by one of you guys, our fans. And he does a video on that topic 1 week, the next week I do a video on the same topic, then the next week he draws a new topic, rinse and repeat. We're both having a lot of fun with it, however, we need fan support if this channel is going to succeed, so go ahead and check it out. Also, go ahead and check out the Chameleon Couch Productions page on Facebook. The Chameleon Couch Productions page is the most reliable way to find all of my latest videos, since we all know that the YouTube subscription service is kind of lackluster, and it's also a good way to not only share your work, but find work from other incredible creators. And of course, there's a lot of amazing discussion that goes on there, especially about Pokemon X and Y as of late. One final thing I want to say, I want to once again thank you guys for an amazing 2 years of Theory Addict. Here's to another amazing 2 years. That about does it for me though. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, the Brandon Brownson, signing out.